Okay, hi. What a lovely room. Thank you guys for coming. So, here wrote some things, but our printer doesn't work, so I'm reading it off my phone. Because, it's 2025. Okay. So, good evening. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you join us for an important discussion on the complexities of lighting procurement in architectural projects. An issue that has been a source of frustration for so many in our industry. Lighting is essential and a part of any project. It defines space, enhances architecture, and influences how people experience an environment. But for something so fundamental, the process of specifying and procuring lighting remains incredibly challenging. Architects and designers often find themselves caught in the cycle of budget discrepancies, you know the ones, substitutions, we also know those too, and unexpected costs, resulting in projects that don't always align with original design vision. At the end of the day, the client is the one who foots the bill for both the design intent and the alternative reality that sometimes emerges. So, big questions we're here to discuss. Is it just why does this happen? But more importantly, how can we do better? How can we create a system that ensures transparency, preserves design integrity, and ultimately delivers best results for everyone involved? We have an incredible panel, guys, of experts with us today who each bring a unique perspective to this issue. Together, they will shed light. You see what ChatGPT did there? I didn't invite any of this, but ChatGPT knows me and knows I'm in lighting, so it's really cute. We have an incredible panel of experts who each bring a unique perspective to this issue. Together, they'll shed light on the key challenges, such as substitutions, pricing structures, overage, and also explore how we can move forward to do better, be better, more transparent in the procurement model. So we'll dive in. To start things off, I'll introduce our panel. So everybody had lovely, beautiful bios that they wrote. I'm not going to read them verbatim because it's a lot, and it should be because they're super fantastic and fabulous, amazing. So ChatGPT boiled these all down. So I'm going to really quickly. So Shoshanna, hey, is passionate about the power of light to create more equitable and accessible spaces. As a principal at Hartranft Lighting Design, she blends artistry and science to shape environments where people live, work, and learn, with a deep understanding of how lighting intersects with technology, social interaction, and commerce. Shoshanna is among the first professionals worldwide to achieve the prestigious CLD certification. Better work, girl. That is me. That wasn't ChatGPT's, but I think that's amazing. She currently serves as president of IESNYC, championing education innovation in the field. And in case you were wondering, she firmly believes that all lighting professionals should drink bourbon. Yeah, expected. It does.
We're not scotch.
Yeah, no, bourbon. Okay, next, Stephen Kelley. Oh, we got the blue-eyed babes are here today, which I really like. So Stephen Kelley approaches design as a way to create meaningful experiences. His work explores temporal nature of interior environments using materiality, richness, and cultural context to invoke memory and tell compelling brand stories. With a career spanning coasts, big deal, and project types, Stephen has worked with nationally recognized firms and successfully led his own practice specializing in residential and hospitality design. He holds a Bachelor of Science. There's the doorbell. Thank you. Gotcha. He currently holds a Bachelor of Science in Art with an architecture concentration from Northwestern University and a Master's in Architecture from the University of Pennsylvania. She's smart. Today, he brings an expertise to HDR as the principal in the firm's New York office. Yes, we love it. Okay. Oh, Matt, the other blue-eyed babe. Love it. Matt Schroeder, design-driven entrepreneur, redefining access to lighting design services for architects and interior designers. He is co-founder of Cosine. He leads business operations and strategic vision, bridging technical expertise with creative solutions since relocating from Chicago to New York in 2010. Is that right? Yeah, that's what I thought. See, sometimes ChatGPT makes mistakes. Yeah, I knew that wasn't right. I also didn't check it. So anyway, Matt has honed his industry knowledge through roles in design resource startup, Delta Light US and Lights on West, recognizing key gaps in pricing transparency and support for smaller firms. He co-founded Cosine to offer a more tailored approach to lighting design. His ability to translate conceptual design into practical implementation makes him a vital resource for the architectural and design community. Yes, that's very true. That is true. I didn't need to proofread that because that's the real deal. Okay, last person, Tom Simon. With background in sculpture, architecture, manufacturing, Tom Simon is passionate about the intersection of aesthetics, function, material innovation, lighting. As a director of design and product development at Juniper, big title, he leads the creation of cutting-edge architectural lighting solutions that enhance visual form, performance, and energy efficiency. Tom holds a BS in studio art from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and an MFA in sculpture from Virginia Commonwealth University, and an MPS in lighting design from New York School of Lighting Design. He also is lighting certified by NCQLP. I don't know what all those things mean, but it seems very important. Bringing a wealth of expertise to development of high-quality, functional, and beautifully crafted lighting products. Wow. Also, the fact that I'm 41 and I can read tiny little words like that is amazing. Okay, so welcome. We're super happy to have you guys. And these are all friends, and we're having a conversation. And so I will leave it to Tom Simon, who will be making sure that everybody moves on like me. Okay, thanks, Tom. I know, it was a lot. I know.
Here. Okay, thank you. We're back to at 7:30 karaoke.
I'll get that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for being here. What I felt like I want to start with a story. My dad is an architect. He's been working in architecture for actually 50 years now. He just celebrated his 50th year last year at Spec Architects. So he's been making buildings for a long time. And as I've been working at Juniper in what is increasingly the architectural lighting space, he has occasionally been like, why is like so hard to specify? Yeah. And, I've talked to him about it a few times, and he has recently told me that it is like the least favorite, most difficult thing of all the stuff he specifies. And these are big buildings, big projects. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff they have to buy, from HVAC to carpet to whatever, furniture, and lighting is the worst. It's the hardest. And so when I was putting this panel together, I was like, would you be willing to have me quote you? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, because it is a problem, and it's a problem for us. So I just think that's important to keep in mind. That's where we're coming from here. We're blessed to have a lot of architects and designers in the showroom who know our product and specify it, and then their clients are the ones who are paying for all this, right? And so we want to make sure that we're keeping that full project team and stakeholder, stack in mind here at Juniper. And I think this panel here represents a really great breadth of projects, of expertise. So, Stephen, is my dad cranky? or do you agree?
He might be both. Right? He might be cranky, and I might agree. I think that in our sort of preparation for this discussions we've been having, one of the things we talked about is that there are a lot of the issues that we're all kind of feeling angst with are of another time. And I think Yosawa's perspective is from another time as well. It's, I know he's still working notice.
Yeah.
But I think, a lot of these are sort of a legacy issue where technology has changed a lot in lighting. And, some of the things that used to be hard and took a lot of time and sort of made the process unbearable aren't necessarily there anymore, but they're still being sort of capitalized on and manipulated to sort of, line people's pockets, frankly. So I think this is really about sort of reflecting where we are, where we're going. The technology's changed, so the process should change. I know one of the things we're sort of going to touch on too is that, the process is different in different places as well. So I think it's really, this point of view, I think it's very valid. It would tie to another time, which is part of the big issue.
I think Shoshanna, we had talked earlier, in terms of these issues, obviously one thing that comes up is obviously cost, and that's where a lot of these kind of changes and some of the things Mel mentioned happening, but quality is obviously really important. I think that's where the frustration lies. What do you think some successful strategies to control quality are on the project?
Well, I think the first thing, and probably the most important thing in my mind, slightly self-servingly, is that architects don't have to specify lighting. Lighting designers specify lighting. And we do it really, really well. It's our job. We're the people on the design team who are laser focused, pun intended, on the visual environment and on visual acuity. And we understand the impact that a successful visual environment has on a project from not just from a visibility standpoint, from an accessibility standpoint, from an emotional well-being, from a health standpoint. We're the people who actually do that. And I think that one of the ways to make your dad less cranky is, I have my own, yes, members, and I have my own cranky dad. So, I think is to understand that there's no project that's too small or too simple for a lighting designer. I don't know a single lighting designer out there, and I do know a fair number of them, who would say, this project is not big enough for me. I don't know a single lighting designer, well, I might know a couple lighting designers who are too big to, attack some of the things, but I know that in our firm, for example, if somebody says, I simply can't afford your services on this project, we'll consult hourly, right? There is no project that can't afford a couple $100. I mean, if you can pay a code consultant, you can pay a lighting consultant. And I think that that's really part of it. The way to increase quality in architectural projects is to increase quality in architectural projects. And that goes for all kinds of consultants, right? I mean, there are people who do only kitchens, only commercial kitchens. And most architects I know who, when faced with a commercial kitchen, would really rather not. Thank you very much. Because that's a whole level of complexity and code and, that just doesn't need to be part of that. That's not part of the space plan, right? So I think that that's part of, I think that's a good first step, is to acknowledge that for people who are trained to specify lighting, it's not really all that hard. It is complicated and it's complex and it is exacting. I don't want to say it's nothing, but I think it's important. I think that would be a good place to start, is could we get a lighting designer on every single project in some capacity?
I believe when we were talking the other day, also, Stephen, you had picked up on that part of this and said it's really important to clarify for the client as the architect the importance of lighting in the project, that it is really important and better is better, because that might not be something someone's really prepared to understand or see. And it's okay, I saved money, but what did you lose, right? And you were talking about, basically walkthroughs or site visits or ways to really get somebody to understand what good is.
Yeah, we were talking about, it's a sort of abstract notion as to what is good. But you walk into a space and it's well lit, you feel it. You walk into a space that's not well lit, and there's dark back edges or glare. It's immediate. And so I think, even if it's sort of a completely different kind of program type, we were just talking about, could you take a client that had come to 3 or 4 really good examples? Maybe something that's stellar, we bring them in gears, or, something that's like reasonably within their budget that's done really well. And so, kind of setting a benchmark that's sort of something that everybody can kind of point to, and we can get there together. We can figure out the best way to do it. But I think, to your point, I, would love to design a hobby project. But a lot of times voters are like, no,
Right.
it seems gratuitous. But I think, again, this demonstration of the value, and also you brought up accessibility, EVA, and he also talked about it the other day, aging place, and our population's getting older. There are a lot of reasons for lighting to be good, and to have an expert at the table early gives us a lot of credence to kind of hold on to those.
I think also, just to sort of jump onto that a little bit, I mean, clients, I have this conversation with clients a lot. You can disagree with me, but you're paying me for my professional opinion. And I think that, we look to our architectural colleagues to understand and to say, you know what, I get that you don't want, I understand why you don't want to have yet another consultant. It seems like a lot. You've got a civil and an electrical and a mechanical. Right? But most of the time, I have found that when people give us an inch, we'll take a mile. And that's a good thing, right? If we have an entree in, and if the client is willing to at least meet with us or understand what it is that we can bring, then generally, even if they say, not for me, at least we've done something to advance the conversation so that maybe the next time when the control system is a mess and the occupancy sensors are doing weird things and the code compliant, the energy guy is like, no, I'm sorry, you can't get your CFO because whatever. Then you can go back and say, well, to see that, those are all things that your lighting design is like.
You mean the I told you so moment?
Yeah, I do mean the I told you so moment. The nice I told you so moment, but the I told you so moment.
Well, that might be a good segue here because Matt, I think you had a really interesting way of describing sort of the same problem from the other side, which is controlling costs on a project. And like when numbers start coming back and the client is like, well, it's a lot of money. You had kind of a rubric for walking them through those choices and what a responsible way to approach that.
Thanks. So first, just to touch on what you guys are talking about, the idea that, architecture and lighting can be separated. Like architecture and lighting have been married since the advent of architecture. So the idea that they can be disconnected is something that like we're actively trying to fight at Cosine. We are trying to get a lighting consultant on every project that we can. That's literally the question that, keeps me up at night. Which a lighting designer on a single project. And part of the frustration and the pain point is pricing, right? Because ownership's going to look at it as superfluous. Obviously, there's an argument to be made to the contrary, but at the end of the day, they're the ownership and they control budget. So like we think that you have to solve it systemically. And so being able to price projects transparently and with tiered pricing makes the conversation very simplistic. And actually, Easter egg for this was that it streamlines design, right? So rather than when you don't have pricing readily available as a lighting consultant, you're sort of designing in like a black box, like in a vacuum, because you don't really understand what the budget is. And so as soon as you're able to inject pricing as a part of the conversation, it's really simple for the ownership to be like, oh, we're not spending $400,000 on the entry chandelier. Like, that's just not a possibility. So cut it. Okay, great. Like, we don't care. The lighting is old. We want it to be as good as it possibly can be. But at the end of the day, budget's a design constraint. And so we have to all adhere to what the budget's actually going to be. And so what we try to do is have like high, medium, low for every single component typology. For decorative, high, medium, low. For 3-inch downlights, high, medium, low. And there's definite... you're losing things when you go from high to low, right? It's noticeable to a trained eye, and it's noticeable to everyone that walks through the space. But then all ownership or the architectural firm that's consulting with us has to define is what's tier 1, what spaces are tier 2, what spaces are tier 3, in order to get to the correct budget.
Yeah, I think the frustration that my dad was expressing was that, and Shoshanna, you spoke to this a little bit, but that it's like when the budget is changing throughout the design process and or wasn't made clear, or somebody said, yeah, like just do the best you can, and then it's like, okay, and now the numbers are back, and now it's kind of like all hell breaks loose, basically. Can you speak to those early conversations that might avoid more painful later conversations?
I mean, we all try. So, there's this weird thing that happens when you say to an design meeting, so what's the budget here? And it's almost as if you've asked somebody like what they make.
Yeah.
Like, it is a personal question that people don't want to answer in a way that, or who'd you vote for? Or who's your hairdresser? Like, I mean, it's like one of those, like, don't ask these questions. Well, okay, you guys don't have that question, but Stacy understands. My friend Stacy Ruiz is out there, and she gets it. So, Mel gets it. I get it. See, okay. So, for some reason, people are embarrassed to say, look, I don't want to spend money on this. And if they would just say, look, I don't want to spend money on this, then I can say, okay, here's what the code says you need to do. Let's start with that. Are you good with spending enough money to get a C above me?
And if the answer is no.
And if the answer is no, well, then we're at an impasse, but we're all there, right? It's not, then it's a whole different discussion, right? Then it's like, okay, well, why are we here?
Right.
But we try to have those conversations. And I mean, I try to have these conversations all the time. And I will tell you that invariably, when I start them, everybody like starts squirming. It really is like, I don't quite understand it. So I think we try to have these conversations. I think that it is one of the things that does make it more difficult is that while I work and live in this magical place called New York, where there's no such thing as a package, and where I am comfortable calling any manufacturer and saying, what is your distributor net? And then I will continue to call up the chain, right? I will call the distributor and say, how much do I need to cover you for? And I will call the contractor and say, how much do I need to cover you for? But that's because I don't really care if I have plenty of friends and I have plenty of colleagues and I don't need to make more friends necessarily. And B, I've done enough of these different jobs that I can actually cut and ask that question, right? So I think that some of it is the idea that knowledge is power, and that of working within the context, if you're going to work within the traditional purchasing system, which for the moment we're going to allow is the system we're stuck with, then I think the thing to do is to be willing to expend fee and to expend time and effort to dig into those things a little bit. And also to keep records so that like, all right, this guy promised me he was going to be good and was only going to put 15 points on my package, but somehow, magically, there were change orders for every single thing. Well, okay, I have some discretion about who works on my project. not quite to this level, but I have some discretion. So I can remember those things. And I do. I have a very long memory.
Stephen does that, or Matt, he makes this.
But the idea that you would have to, one, spend the resources of lighting design chasing veiled markup around, and then not necessarily get the truth. And worst, if they are lying, then you would have to go swap out a manufacturer for a different manufacturer because there's this like roadblock in the way.
Oh, they always want to.
But to me, like that's
But I guess
wildly inefficient.
it is wildly inefficient, but I don't think it's any more inefficient than coming up with 3 2-inch downlights.
Totally.
Right? It's the same thing. It's just a different flavor, right? It's the difference between caramel and butterscotch, I'm gonna go with, right? Neither one of them are chocolate, and therefore they are both inferior. However, for different people, oh boy.
We'll settle this.
Now you're going to tell me that a smoky old fashioned is not a good thing. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Brief sidebar. I think though, there are inefficiencies in the system, right? So whether the inefficiency, I think it's a matter of which inefficiency annoys you more, right? So the only time I write a 3-name spec is when I'm literally forced to by a state law. And then I do it. I write 3 names with 3 catalog numbers and 3 specifications. But I'm also very old school in my specification habits, and I specify the gauge of the steel in the housing and the size of the flange on the downlight and like all of that, which most people don't like to do anymore. So, but I'm not sure that I think it's any more or less efficient. We still have to kind of work around the system.
It's 2 solutions to the same problem.
Yeah.
Is the lack of efficiency, the lack of transparency that exists.
Stephen, can you speak to this? Because obviously you're the one who's probably having the earliest, largest conversations about budget. How does lighting, in those early stage conversations, how does that come about in terms of share of the pie?
It's definitely discounted. It depends on the type of project, but I just wanted to speak to what these guys were talking about a little bit too, because I think, part of this is it's kind of a long game too. If we could start to sort of show the value of good lighting early, even if it's not, they don't hire a lighting designer and spec, manufacturers for the first project, they're planting the seeds. We start to show what a good benchmark. I'm assuming your high, medium, and low, they're all good. Like the low is not going to be terrible.
It's not a wafer.
We're locking them up to compare. You're checking them against somebody's. But there is still a serious degradation from like a fiber down like to maybe. It's just very apparent. And I think that part of this is building a sense with the clients that lighting is more important than it has been. And part of their perception of it being either a shady business and not that important is because, again, it's the way everybody's been doing it and buying into the system. And then, I'm not a light designer, but I know when I started my career, there were so many different types of light. It was so time consuming, even on the design side. As we talked about in the call the other day, LEDs made things a lot easier.
Now, we used to have multiple sources, kids. Back in the year 3 when dinosaurs were here. Different light sources, different characteristics, different uses, and different use cases.
So, I think that it's something that is probably it's in the same sort of track as a lot of other things that are going to sort of gain more importance. This seems like a weird kind of broad stretch, but the AI thing actually referring to, I think, I'm actually excited about AI getting more sort of prominent in our industry. And I think that, those of us who have some experience and, for lack of a better word, kind of wisdom, can use it as a good tool. But it is going to streamline a lot of things. It's going to streamline a lot of how we design. And, architects and designers are going to be doing a lot less work in some ways, but their expertise are going to be of more value. And I think the lighting designers need to be seen more as an expert that's at the very sort of early stage because of your point with the sort of accessibility and ADA and all these things, but also the quality of the space. And am I getting louder?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm a little wispy. But I also think that, and this may sound like a reach too, there's a little bit of a sustainability point of view here too. We build this environment. This environment should not be a 5 or 10 year build. It should be a 30-year build.
At least.
So you're anticipating new technologies. You're anticipating, how materials are going to perform. There's all these things that like we need to be more thoughtful and wise about. So I think the whole process has to get reinvented. I'm sorry.
No.
You're talking about navigating the system. You're making calls or you're making your lists. I can't imagine if it's a downlight that you're clearly reinventing the wheel each time. You've got your go-tos. So it's just, I think we all need to push back the system at the front, in the middle, and at the end too.
I think the other thing too is it's important to note that, for example, if you're doing a 30-year build, we used to, it's embarrassing to say now, but we used to only care about the 7-year commercial lease.
Yeah.
Right? This is the dirty little secret. Nobody cared beyond 7 years because it was coming out. The lease was up. People were moving. That was it. Okay, we've grown up a little bit since then. We understand these things a little bit more holistically. But the reality is if you're going for a 30-year build, if you put in junk, it's not going to last for 2 years, let alone 3 or 10 or 30. And then when you have to replace it, the goal is to replace as few components as possible, right? If you're looking at this from a broad sustainability standpoint, the goal should be, what can I take out that's minimal and put back in that's equally minimal and also less impactful environmentally, et cetera, et cetera. So at some point, you have to then appeal to owners' sort of like their ESG values, right? It has to be about stewardship and about where they see themselves in that marketplace as well. It starts to unravel quickly.
It's strategy and planning.
Right.
There needs to be a sort of master plan of a project that has all the right people at the table. Mm-hmm. And lighting's a big part of it. I'm just looking at the millwork over here, all this light. Even if these LEDs didn't wear out, you're ripping a lot of millwork apart to sort of make these changes. So all of this has to be really thought out.
Well, and it's definitely something.
Even if it's 50 years from now.
Right. No. We think about that at Juniper. It's for me the greatest compliment as a designer of luminaires would be that somebody 20, 30 years from now would take the time to like rewire it or refresh. Right. Like then I did my job. That we made something that is that beautiful, that useful, that somebody's like, don't change it, just keep it going. And I think about that also when I hear about buildings, right? What's the greenest building you can do? It's the one you got, basically.
Yeah.
Don't rip it down and then build a LEED platinum like that.
You touched on something else too that I think I mentioned the other day, but just so my old brain doesn't lose it. There's also something in terms of the design aspect. I'm looking at the desk lamps over here. Those are a classic already. And to your point, somebody may want to rewire them in 50 years, but there is something to be said for a thoughtful design that's worked through the whole team that people fall in love with. They protect it and they keep it. That's its character, its artifact. It's something that just, we tend to sort of not give as much value to, but to me, it's a sustainability point of view, but it's also the right thing to do. If we're spending time to design it and we've got experts at the table, this should be pretty spectacular and enduring.
I think it's a tactile thing too. It's a human thing. It's like a human scale thing, right? The practice of design at its most fundamental is about making spaces for people, right? And that requires a level of concern and attention and empathy, presence, all of those things that should go into building objects of lasting value and building spaces of lasting value. And if you think about the places that we spend our lives and the places where we have our significant moments, right?
educational facilities, houses of worship, residential facilities, healthcare. Those are all facilities.
Typical is a big sheepers.
I mean, bars.
Very important.
See that? But those are all places where somebody's attention has been paid. You know, attention must be paid. But it's in designing these spaces, that's what we need to do. And I think that it does become a sustainability issue, but it also just becomes a good design issue, right?
Right. Not just how long it lasts, but how do people feel while they're there?
Yeah, and better is better.
Better is better. So, Matt, I think you had said something before that I want to kind of pull out of you, which was you have kind of a rubric for how much of a budget you guys thought lighting would be, you know, on a percentage basis. And I thought that was really interesting because it was something I hadn't really heard before, honestly.
Yeah. And, you know, this is just in our 3.5 years of existence, so take it with a grain of salt. But in general, what we've seen is budget for architectural lighting specific budget, so not the FF&E decorative, just architectural lighting, ranges from 3 to 4%. So part of why there's squirming when you've asked for budget is because no one knows what the pencil budget is either. Like it's an arbitrary subdivision of the overall budget to ask what architectural lighting is. And so it's hard for them to answer that question. But what we've seen, and I'm finally sharing this number completely publicly, is it's about 3 to 4% on average. But then you look at standard deviations, and like there are jobs where it's multifamily rentals, and they don't want to spend any budget. Like, they want to center multi box in the living room and switch outlets, and the tenant will bring their own lights. And there's the art gallery that wants very specific foot cable levels in order to sell their art. And so, you know, it ranges based on what the typology of spaces. We're trying to get more data on specific typologies of spaces, then it'll come with time. That's what I wanted to say. The you know, I've done a lot of work with tech companies, and that tracks. Yeah, they dead on. Thank you.
So maybe on that note, Stephen, you know, in terms of project, not just project types, but you've done projects all over the country. Are there parts of the country where lighting is easier, harder, better, worse? I mean, what's the most well-lit part of the country?
I can only say from my experience, and you might laugh, but Chicago was actually very easy. I did a couple really big projects for Meta there, and it was delightful. You know, we got everything we asked for. We got it put in with a smile.
Well, that's that Midwest.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you know, I think the sort of weird sort of rep though is like projects we've done here, especially with some of the big tech companies. Like Firestone. The lighting designers and the sort of specifiers and everything were in the Pacific Northwest. So then there was this kind of matching of their system and then sort of trying to kind of interface it with New York, which is always complicated. But in terms of kind of a pure kind of smooth experience, Chicago was fantastic. But projects in the Pacific Northwest tend to go pretty easily. And the Bay Area has got its own complications, but New York's definitely hard.
Mm-hmm. I think New York is hard, but New York is hard in a different way than, say, Texas is hard.
Right. Well, Texas.
Texas. I mean, we talked about Texas last week. Full disclosure, when we were talking about this before, Texas is a hard place. It is a very hard place. And other places like that, right, where there's
Texas one's the corruption.
Yes.
Yeah. Or whatever you like.
Crashed. Self-interest. Let's go with this. Self-interest.
Yeah.
My euphemism of the day. But I mean, New York is tough, but I think part of the reason that New York is tough is because everything, because we're so contained and so cramped, everything costs. There is an opportunity cost to every single rivet in every single product. I mean, and not just in lighting, in furniture, in millwork, in a hardware, everything. Because in order to get it in, and now there's an extra, what is it, extra $60 or whatever it is to, like, it's even more, right? Which so I think that's.
And take a train.
Right. Takes tricks. Mass transit. It's gonna say. So I think though that that's part of. There's also the old schoolness of New York, right? I mean, we often joke about whether there's such a thing as a lighting mafia, and okay, there kind of maybe is, and I have in fact sat across from make guys and said things, and it's been kind of uncomfy, but okay, whatever. What could really go wrong there? But I think that actually in New York we played many fewer games, or we're much more upfront about the games we're playing, perhaps, than in other places in the country.
But that's hard to explain to a client.
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, I have said to people, I'm going to explain the system to you, and you're not going to understand it. And they said, oh, come on, I'm really a smart person. And I have explained the entire system from the distributor net to the distributor to the rep to the contractor and they said, what the hell?
Yeah. Well, and I think the transparency piece is huge because, everybody who adds value should get paid. That's a fact. But I think that the challenge, I mean, one of the things my dad was talking about was a project where the distributor said, oh, we don't carry that. And it's like, that's not true.
Right.
They got cut off.
They got cut off. They couldn't
like
get
the
it.
terms.
The package wasn't as good as the other package. But it's like, just say it, man. Like, don't.
Right. I mean, just say it's going to cost me 30 extra %. And is that good for you? Right. Right. And sometimes the answer is yes.
Because they're pushing that expense back onto the specifier, which pushes it back onto the client. Somebody's got to spend more hours. And is the outcome going to be as good? Maybe not, because it's done on the fly and it's done under duress and without all the thought that you guys have put in from the beginning to make something coherent. So I think that is, we have an obligation to do the best project we can. Is that helping? I'm not sure it is.
This is going to change, right? Yeah. It's going to change, and change always happens real slow at first, and then all. And so, if our industry continues to dance around it and protect the folks that we know to be guilty of this type of process, or creating opacity, like opaqueness in the process, they're coming for us. Like, don't overlook the fact that when you go to an AV supplier, community event, they are there looking at us like juicy low-hanging fruit. There's nothing stopping them to hire lighting designers in-house to start to take over this industry. And all of the manufacturers that have traditionally been blockaded by the Osram, Philips, GE conglomerates, they can't wait. They can't wait to try and jump that moat because it's a huge market opportunity for them. Well, that's my perspective. Yeah, I was going to go there too. I mean, it's a lot of them are doing it in-house already, right? So there's a reason Lutron bought Ketra and is rolling it out across the entire country.
Yes, the problem is that Lutron and Lutron dealers are not qualified to do my job. And I'm going back to a lighting designer, and I don't mean a lighting designer who is also a salesperson, I mean a lighting designer, a person who is focused on the visual environment in the space. I'm not going to argue that Ketra is not a quality product, and it's definitely getting better and developing. But the guy who puts in the speakers doesn't know what I know.
You'll get nowhere.
I know that. I mean, the good news is that I'm also not trying to put in speakers, right? If somebody says, can you do my AP? Hell no. I don't.
But picture a world where every single city that's a lighting design studio that's acquired by an AV, the dominant AV company. Like, that's a real threat to lighting sectors around the country right now. And it makes sense. And so I guess my position is just that, we need to stop protecting those folks that are in the way and create a confusion and find a different way, because we do find value. It's important that there's that the only way to do that is to change.
I mean, I will say that I really like the idea of a maximum price. More than I love the idea that we will not accept an order for more than X for this product. And I have said this before, even though there is utility to the practice of overage, until overage specifically, and I'm gonna stop a minute. Does everybody understand what that means? Let me explain that for a second. So a manufacturer X makes a downlight and they price it at $100. Fine. Nobody's arguing that $100 is too much to pay for a downlight. Well, some people are, but we don't care about that. Okay. $100 is a reasonable price to pay for a downlight. In the current setup, ecosystem, I guess, the person who's in charge of what that $100 downlight costs is the rep. And I am not saying that the rep is a bad person or that they don't provide value. They do provide value and they do good things. However, they are also contractually entitled to make the price of that $100 downlight anything they want. $200, $300, whatever. And if they make it $200 and if you buy it, then they keep 90% of that overage.
Just to be fair, every manufacturer has their own overage agreement with the various listen to this. I was actually talking to a manufacturer today of education about how we will accept overage from any manufacturer that we work with. And they said that they have the most aggressive policy. It's inverted. So if the rep gets overage on their line, the factory keeps 90%.
So I love that.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
That's how you follow.
But isn't that a slippery slope, because if they have other lines?
Correct.
Yes.
Which is why
Which is the package issue.
that's why you get lot price. That's why
Right.
this is like the whole problem. This is the opacity.
Right there.
No rep that knows that they have a locked spec, something that's extremely unique, will allow you to break up the package, because then they're vulnerable to losing what is potentially the bulk of the order that's like not proprietary at all.
So I would argue, though, that good specification is the strongest weapon against that. Mm-hmm. Honestly, when I tell you that I have seen Louis Poulsen installed in a public library on a 3-name spec with one of those Florida package guys who desperately wanted to come in and do it, and I still said no. Good specification and understanding what is significant is really the best weapon we have. It would be great if everybody would, tra-la-la and kumbaya and make friends and share. The reps who deal with me, good. Yeah. The reps who deal with me know that I don't play these games and that I protect my spec. And so they don't play these games with me because I protect my spec. When I spec a brand A downlight, I expect to see a brand A downlight. And if I don't get it, if the distributor or the contractor tries to play around, this again goes back to, I pick up the phone and call anybody that I have to get it done. And while it is not the most efficient way, it is my job. If I'm writing a specification, I need to be willing to stand behind it and really stand behind it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we are coming towards the end here, but I wanted to say we had talked about this stuff. What can we all do better? right? We all have a role to play here. We all have a piece of this pie. And I think it's unfair to put it on any one party, and it's unfair to expect one, slice of the project team to bear the burden of change, right? And also to Matt's point, like we're all in trouble if, 20 years from now, architects are still saying this is the worst thing to specify. I don't have a crystal ball, so it might be player A, it might be player B, but you're creating a huge opportunity for somebody else to come and mess with what we do, in one way or another. So what can we do better? What can we do better? And I think, Stephen, you had mentioned, make the case for lighting, right? Make the case that this is an important part of the project, and doing it well makes the whole project better. You can't see the finishes. Who cares what the finishes cost? Or for Shoshanna, like you're saying, control the budget, have those tough conversations early so that the spec that goes in is the spec that they want to pay for. That you've talked about, like having some spine, right? Saying like, we can't accept those terms or pushing back on some of these situations. But maybe you want to, Dave already said these things. Maybe you want to talk about how you control some of these situations.
It's transparency, right? We demand transparency. The way Cosine is structured, just to talk quickly about it, is we do not work with a lighting of brands that will push us through representation for a litany of reasons. The fact that it's geography based, the fact that it's slower than dealing with the factory direct. Like, we just do not deal with them. And the reason is because what I would push other lighting design studios to do is to demand transparency. I want to know what the DNet price is, and I want to know what you're going to push to distribution. If I talk to the distributor and I find out that you guys are lot pricing stuff, you're banned. I'm out. And then don't cancel the manufacturer because of the representation. Go to the manufacturer and say, look, this is not a service that I want. I do not want lot pricing going out so that we can hide markup. And enough of us voices start chiming in, they're going to wake up because they're already doing it. The AV suppliers are already like, set me up direct. And you're like, no, we're not allowed to. And then, okay, we're not going to use you. Hey, Blue Truck, and they're like, okay, wait, come back here. Yeah, I will send you guys up direct in the capacity that, allows for transparency.
I think it's a great point. And I think that, we've had a lot of discussions at Juniper about our role in this. And for us, I think perhaps because we came from outside this, right? We didn't, at first, there's definitely some naivete about not knowing what we didn't know.
That was my bad.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
We just didn't know you couldn't do that. But also, we just really value our relationships. Like, we really value our relationships with all the people in this room. And it's like, I cannot imagine doing this job without getting to talk directly to everyone who's here and expecting someone else to do that for me. Because I get so much from it. I've learned so much from, like, Stacy, who we mentioned earlier. Like, Stacy's known me since I was making lampshades. I didn't know. There's the list of the things I didn't know was extremely long, and I didn't know. But I think that's something that we just really value. We value our relationships, and I think that the idea that we would do something that would not be at the best interest of the people on the other end of that relationship is like outlandish to us, and yet that's kind of like the title here is like, aren't we kind of? I mean, competition is competition, and it's important, and we should be competing. That's how things get better, but it seems very one-sided at times on these projects. And so, yeah, I think just not handing the keys over to somebody, and it sounds like there's a lot of fear out there. A lot of people are afraid.
I like to think about whenever we find these problems is like, why? Why does this exist? And the answer, if you look back in history, the answer isn't why this exists in lighting. It's This existed throughout construction, right? Like maybe we had to have a card from the IIDA in order to like get into a building in order to get toured around and pick up pillows. What's happened is it's just eroded, right? Fabric's direct now, carpet's direct now, like it's slowly eroding. And so the only reason that this exists in lighting is the same reason it exists in windows and doors, door hardware, all the complicated technical fields still exist like this. I guess the argument is that it will continue to erode and eventually there will be a solution. I can't tell you what it is.
Well,
You think a guess?
no, I think there's a lot of technology that's coming into the space, and Steven's mentioned it, and I think we're starting to see it happen. Well, listen, with that, I think we could go for another like 3 hours, for sure. There is so much to talk about, and it's very interesting because it's how things get done. If you don't pay attention to this end of it, stuff doesn't get done. That's full, or what gets done isn't what you want to get done. But maybe we should turn to some.
Ooh, I got questions. Thank you to the 1, 2, 3, 4 whole people of all this room I talked to personally to ask to write a question to the 4 of you who actually did this, which I feel like somebody maybe from my team, so we're gonna say 3. So this is kind of a fun one. It is if you had. Oh, you've ever been to Juniper? Yes. Yeah, I know. We all know why. Okay. If you had unlimited resources and no restrictions, what's the most radical, game-changing lighting concept you would want to bring to life? Steven. Go.
That's a really unfair question.
Could be anything.
I think
Your heart's desire.
super flexible lighting, you couldn't see the fixtures.
Okay.
Just magic light.
Magic light.
So there.
I like magic
Whoever
light.
wrote that, so there.
Magic lights.
I don't use
Yeah, I like magic light. Aesthetics.
I have this dream of a hospitality project. I know that sounds so weird. I have a dream of a hospitality project. What the hell is wrong with me? I have a dream of a hospitality project though, where basically you check into the hotel, and the person at the desk says, "Oh, Miss Segal, I see you're arriving from New York here to Singapore. Would you like me to set your room to help you reacclimate to the time zone?"
Like,
Tricky.
okay, nice idiot ask.
It's
Get going.
So there's this company that we've worked with in the past that sort of has this dilemma. They have the highest-end clientele on the planet, and what I think is interesting about their process is the way they go to market is they basically go to the customer and say, "What's the concept? What's the concept of the space?" The conversations happen. There's technical people in the room. There's engineers behind them, and then the architect is driving harshly what the concept is, and the manufacturer is behind them supporting that vision. And to me, it's certainly high budget projects because it's basically full cost.
Harshly.
Yeah, there's a very specific vision. I'll give you an example.
We're talking party. Can we do that to Crate?
There was a time when we got banned from using the word budget. We don't like the word budget.
Application.
Well, what is the budget?
Because there's no reality. Fairly resolving.
Okay.
Tom, do you want to answer that? If you had unlimited resources and no restrictions, what is the most radical game-changing lighting concept you would want to bring to life? Tom.
I think, the idea of a space, we've done a lot of workspace lately, and I think that like everybody's a little bit on edge about what the future workspace has been part of many people's livelihoods. It's a huge, like the 7-year lease, right? Like in New York, it drives the economy. So I think something where like really figuring out how to solve the workspace problem, like a lighting solution for workspace that can flex with the, the requirements. We actually had the Google team in here, and they were talking about a year ago, they were talking about radical optionality, right? So like being basically like, we don't know what we're going to be doing next year, so how do we design a space for that? I think that's a really interesting problem in lighting because of, first of all, the physical limitations.
Okay, I got a hot goss. This one was good. If there were 3 procurement agents all quoting the same product for the same project, is there any advantage to giving one of those agents a steeper discount? What would happen if you didn't?
Except for mates.
For anybody.
So I've heard of it being done before. It creates a relationship.
Yes.
Right? And so when we're back in my previous life, when you were bidding out jobs, you were looking for people that are providing value. And so at a distribution level, what I was looking for is like contractual obligation that the customer had to have a relationship with these folks and volume. And that would then warrant an additional discount versus a stranger.
I believe we call it a national account.
Well, I would more say that like back there was a distributor that was handling international distribution.
Who was it? Just kidding.
Starbucks, and we were,
Oh, I know that.
and right? And so the national account exists with Starbucks or whatever the retailer is. But what we found was everyone was trying to bid these jobs, but there were people with a history of executing these jobs. And so Starbucks would kind of, or whatever, insert retailer here, would kind of say like, hey, we would really like it to go to these people because they're kind of a partner.
Got it.
And so you would just naturally sort of send up for the stranger who was not desired by the customer to lose.
So I'm going to say this. There is a different advantage. There is an advantage, for example, to allowing people who are in business from traditionally disadvantaged communities, to allow them to get projects which gives people and communities access to experiences that they have previously been denied. And that is that's why we have a WBE system in place. And I think in that case, there's a societal good to moving more people out of subsistence economies into more regular economies. And one of the ways that we do that is by allowing people who haven't had those opportunities to have those opportunities. So I can see that, transparency aside, I can see a definite good for that.
Steven, what do you think?
It's a little
How many tickets do I have to buy you to Color Invasion in order for you to Should I do that?
No, I was going to say, I think there needed to be some context around it, but there can be sort of good things that we could generate that, legitimize that, not just grift.
Yeah.
Somebody's also supporting.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. Thank you. Cute.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you, Manny, wherever you are. Can't see you, but I'm over here somewhere. So we are gonna wrap things up, right?
Sure.
Fine.
Do we want to take a look at?
Oh, anybody would like? Is there a hot topic question?
Yes.
That's what's up. Let's hear it.
We've heard the word transparency a lot this evening, but I'm just curious to know how that would translate to integrity. Where if you talk about these reading spec, but acting with integrity across the whole supply chain, right? What does that look like for the weakest link?
Well, none of the weakest link is sitting here, so.
I don't know if this answers the question exactly, but, I think that, the clients, it puts me in a better position, obviously, if we can sort of say that this is a clear process, so that my brain's also connecting to, the just label, which my prior firm was just rated. You can't sort of sit there and talk about these other sort of initiatives that the firm's doing, all this stuff, and then kind of buy into the system that's so opaque. It's so correct seems like a really strong word, but true. And so, I think that it puts more onus on me to kind of really try to sort of be upfront about this stuff. And so I think it is integrity. And I think it ties in to the sort of greater sense of integrity of a firm and of a designer.
Well, and doesn't it? I mean, it only takes the rock getting flipped over once to then have people start asking what's going on over here and what's going on over here and what's going on over here.
I think, but the rock has been flipped over a number of times.
It's multi-sided, but
It is a multi-sided. Just keeps flipping.
big.
Yeah, there's lots of roller coasters up there. But it does, I think it does, what I think it takes actually is, in part, continual rock flipping, to torture that analogy some more. And that means saying, for example, to your clients, okay, you're going to ask me what this costs, and I'm going to explain it to you. And here is the breakdown. And here is the value that each person in the chain is bringing to the breakdown. I am not anti-distributor. Distributors bring value to project. Distributors are the bank. They are the people who finance this whole thing. Yeah. Reps bring value to the project. Contractors bring value to the contract, to the project. Sorry, design. Everybody brings value in different ways, and it's important. Part of it, transparency, integrity, rock flipping, whatever you want to call it. You have to be willing to say, these are the slots that all of these things fit into. People may argue that 20%, 25% is an unreasonable markup, but that's also the system in which we have chosen to work, right? That comes back to because capital, right?
So, but I think it also has to be coupled with what you said earlier about architecture and light being married.
Yes.
Having a sort of understood goal of, what you want this project to be. The owner has to be, or the person paying, has to be really bought into this to help defend us.
Right.
The grift too. So it's all
Figured.
it's unmissed.
Oh,
Oh.
Sean.
Oh,
A question from Shoshanna, please.
Are you in the industry?
So my question is, so first of all, you like to McDonald's every day, and you like, how do you think the trust you relate?
Is it Wendy's trying to do that?
Is that okay? I mean, yeah. All the information, it'll get more random. But it seems to me that there are two costs. One is the cost, the dollars, and the other is the uncertainty, right? And one of you touched upon this shows maximum level of out. So let's assume that the whole process is such that everyone is out. The manufacturer, the agent, distributor, the electrical contractor, the general contractor, and so on. And let's say that's over the manufacturer's price. It's $100. So you're $100 line, here's $200. Okay. That's one part. Let's say all that is extra value add. But if that's $300 a month, and it's $100 on Tuesday, and that's because the incentives are such that people are doing situational pricing, measuring you up, measuring up the project, see what you're willing to pay. That's mortgage. What hides that is package pricing. And that's the reality, right? You have a practice of putting in whatever price you want. And in order to not create outrage, because you getting that pricing for two different projects, 2 different days, it's enormously different. It's rolled up into action. Okay. So my question is, what would you recommend for the industry such that we can provide pricing to value, such that people can see? Shoshanna, you mentioned, for example, if I explain to my clients, this is this value, that's that value. How do you do that when you don't have the breakdown? How do you do that when you don't know what is being charged to you based on what you're purchasing?
Well, so I think some of that comes from experience. So I'm going to say I do know what that is. I mean, part of it is because I was around and I was a manufacturer and I'm still a specifier. So part of that is just, I mean, it's just experience, right? But I think that it's about, I think the situationalness of it has to do with people's willingness to accept it, right? So like I can be as upfront as, I mean, people are, I think in general, I tend to trust, at least in this local community, when I ask what is the cost of this widget, somebody says it's $60. I believe that it's $60. And I have gone back and said, is it really $60 or is it $50, but you're putting an extra 10 because you know that there needs to be a sacrificial lamb? Mm. And sometimes that's the answer. It's really $50, but I'm putting that $60 in because I'm going to need to negotiate. Okay, is that great? No, but if I can say to my client, look, here's the deal. This is where we are. And because we don't work in a delivery system, and because as long as somebody can make money, somebody will make money. Okay, that's capitalism.
Go back to the why. Why does this exist? Why is the price fluctuating based on the wind, right? It's because of the rep's experience. So a rep, a distributor, they're wining and dining their clients, they're spending hours, they're allocating time and resources to relationships. And at the end of the day, that costs money. And then that on public bid, they're killed for a quarter, right? Like it's someone can just sneak up from behind and catch you at value that they spent months, years investing in it to then have that. So they're going to protect themselves, and they protect themselves with lot pricing. And it makes sense that they do it this way. And I have nothing against the reps or distributors. Both services are required. Lighting designers and architects need to understand more technically how products are going to perform in their projects. My only argument is, do they need both markups? Like, couldn't they dual service? Like, couldn't they do two things, or do they only could they do one?
Okay, last question. That's you. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have the ability or power to put in the specification that when the job goes to bid, all unit pricing will be a valid proposal?
I can put,
some is not, because
not only that, I have put estimated pricing in my spec. The estimated distributor net cost of this Louis Poulsen artichoke is $25,000.
that's interesting on the depth.
Here's the great thing about a specification. There are no rules. You can put anything you want in your spec. It's your spec. So if you want to put a price and say, this is what I think this is going to cost, or I have received this information, call this phone number to confirm it, good on you. And yes, in my...
That's the last thing, is to make sure that your salesperson's listed on your planning schedule so that they can contact you, because they're already near the project. They know every single facet because they've been called 25 times about all of the various details of the project.
How is the hook going to go into the like this, all of that. And I literally have called reps and just babbled at them and then hung up and had them come back with information that's useful. I mean,
it's the cross-spec shops that are causes block.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're a developer and you're going to build a building, you have $1 million lighting spec on your table, that is what you signed off on. And someone comes up and says, hey, I can do that for $500 and your promotion is tied to the fact that you come in with the budget, like you're going to at least pay attention
The problem is that the person who comes in, and I think we all know this, the person who comes in and says, I can do that for 500K is not actually doing that for 500K. They're doing something as similarly as reasonable facsimile of that for 500K. And that's a whole different thing. And people need to understand that. And people, I think part of it comes down to construction managers and project managers need to be comfortable of turning to clients and saying, it's not actually the same thing. It's actually, there is no such thing as or equal. I actually will not specify or equal. I do not do it because there's no such thing. Equal, equivalency is the same. And it's not this, if it's this or the same as this, then it's this. It's pretty straightforward, right? So that's part of it too, is this idea, this false race to the bottom, this false idea of false equivalency. We could go completely off the rails and talk about how that's a moral discussion too, right? If it's the same as this, it's this. So give me this.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
My wife is great.